So there's a reason why the Jacob Melton storyline is more relevant than ever. And we got a little update from Dana Brown over the weekend. Nothing too impactful, but interesting. So we'll talk about it here. He has confirmed that they've had at least initial conversations with both Bregman and Tucker's reps with no official offers being made. Now, we've seen aversions by Jim Crane to long extensions on their pending free agents, extending their own guys. I do wonder if there's any reason to be optimistic here, given maybe the evolution we've seen in Jim Crane's thinking, at least as far as free agency goes, with the Josh Hader deal. But three guys that Chandler Rome specifically identifies here as being more likely candidates for extensions are guys that are in arbitration or pre-arb guys. And so three guys that stick out are Brian Abreu, Jeremy Pena, and Yainer Diaz. Rome says those guys seem more like prime candidates for Crane style extensions. Out of those three, I think it's obvious that Abreu is the more likely candidate because Jeremy Pena, you probably still want to see another year of what he does. Yainer Diaz, you want to see a full season of what he does before you're willing to extend him. So Brian Abreu is interesting, right? Because you've got Presley, you just signed Hader to this big deal. Would Crane be likely to invest even more money into this bullpen?
I think it's a matter of how much money. Brian Abreu is 3 seasons away from free agency. Right? He's 26 years old, 3 years away. So there's no critical rush on this. But over those 3 years, I guess he could pitch well into his late 30s. But Ryan Presley has this year and will presume he makes the 50 appearances to vest the option for 2025. And good chance that's it for him. So that's $14 million coming off the books. So if you wanted to backload it a little bit in terms of the cash on the barrelhead for Abreu, it averages out, and that's how it counts toward the collective bargaining competitive balance tax. But Abreu now, I guess we'd say it's been about a season and a half of great pitching, right? He really blew up in a good way the second half of 2022 and then was just fantastic in 2023. But that's a season and a half of stellar pitching, a 26-year-old guy. He's a really good bet at this point. Rafael Montero had one good major league season and got 3 years, $34.5 million. Timing isn't everything in life, but it sure counts a lot, right? Montero had that year as he was free agency eligible. Abreu's 3 seasons away from that, right? This is his first season of arbitration eligibility. He's making $1.75 million. Great for 99% plus of humanity, but within Major League Baseball, that's a song. So year 2 of arbitration, would he jump to 4? And then year 3, 8? Would it go 6 and then 10? And if you're going to buy out those 2 years of arbitration, okay, then what are you going to add beyond that makes Abreu say, there's my generational wealth, or at least the figure that I'm willing to lock it in so that if I blow out my arm when I'm 26, 27, 28, hey, I know I've made the money that I would have made going year by year through age 30. But Josh Hader got 5 years. I don't think Jim Crane would have any desire to go 5 years right now on Brian Abreu unless they thought they were getting a serious steal.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind trying to line that up to where, it's Abreu and Hader, through Hader's contract, which is through 2028. I wouldn't mind, because he'll be 34 by then. You could make the argument that maybe he's not quite what he used to be, where Abreu is quite a bit younger. And then kind of to Charlie's point, not only we have Presley's deal coming off the books after likely 2026, Montero will be off the books after 2025. Mm-hmm. So, and he's making, we know, a significant chunk of change. We spent a lot of time talking about that. So
Presley and Montero should come off together.
Yeah.
Presley has the option for 25.
So
that's $25 million that you'd be clearing if both are gone at that point.
So I'd have no problem breaking off a piece of that to keep Abreu around and have him and Hader be, your 1-2 punch at the back end of the bullpen for, the next several years going forward. I think the timing actually works out kind of well, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, but 3 seasons away means you probably you have more leverage to get a better deal from the Astros side on Abreu, because
Yep.
he's far more incentivized to take less over more years because he can get to that good money quicker. The closer you get to free agency, the less likely Abreu signs a more team-friendly deal, because he sees the light at the end of the tunnel, and he knows if he's still pitching at this level, and that is a big if, right? But if he is pitching at this level, then the eyes start getting real big, and you really start seeing dollar signs as you're getting closer to free agency, and maybe that team-friendly deal doesn't really look as attractive anymore. And I know my tease for this segment seems a little odd because we went in the direction of pitching. So let's circle back to that, because the news drip over the weekend was about Tucker and Bregman. They're being confirmed, which we already knew from Tucker. Tucker had already kind of confirmed that the team has been in talks with his representation. But you look at who we talked about as far as guys who are closer to a more prime circumstance for the Astros and Jim Crane to extend them, those being Abreu, Pena, and Diaz, and then guys who are less likely because they're going to command more dollars in Tucker and Bregman. Bregman was just, Charlie, you mentioned it before in the pre-show that The Athletic did some projections on valuations for guys who are, coming near to free agency. They have Bregman at the 7-year, $210 million mark. I don't think the Astros go anywhere near that. If that's the market price for him, then I don't see that being the case. So that's two questions. One is, how likely do you think Alex Bregman, how realistic that number is, 7 years, $210 million? And then where do you think the Astros would be willing to go to? And do you see a middle ground that Bregman maybe agrees to?
Alex has a lot riding on the 2024 performance, I think, in terms of how long a team will be willing to go with him. If he's the player that he's been over the last 4 years, that's a very good player, but it's not a superstar. As Bregman turns 30, I think the tier of elite third basemen over the last 3-4 years, all of them have signed long-term contracts. Rafael Devers, 10 years, basically $31 million per year with the Red Sox at age 26. Each of the last 3 years, Devers has been a better offensive player than Alex Bregman. Jose Ramirez with the Indians when he signed it, now Guardians, tremendous player. He's been better than Bregman as a baseball player 3 years in a row. He took 5 years, basically $125 million, which is what Altuve got in his extension, which frankly would strike me as very fair for Alex Bregman and his. No doubt Bregman and Scott Boras are going to be aiming higher than that. Manny Machado, whose contract I think on the back end is going to be a nightmare for the Padres. He now basically is in 11 years, $350 million. It's going to pay him through age 41, which is just stupid unless you accept it as total sunk cost on the back end. And then a young guy who's really not a match with Bregman, Austin Riley with the Braves, who also the last 3 years, each year, he's been a better player than Alex Bregman. But he was 3 years away from free agency when he signed 10 years, about $212 million with the Braves. So we're talking mid-20s and up for the third baseman, where Bregman and Boras will certainly position him. Hey, I'm with those guys. But for how long a period of time? If Bregman this year is the player that he's been the last couple of years, right? He says he's primed to have the biggest season of his career. I'll believe it when I see it. I don't think he has a 2019 level season in him. He was a super duper star, first ballot Hall of Famer, 2018, 2019, 4 years running now. He's not been close to that. Very good player, but not close to that. But very good, has a lot of value in the way the marketplace has gone crazy with extensions. He'd start the extension at age 31. I'd be very wary of 7 years, but if I'm Jim Crane in the Astros and he's had another very good season, unless DeCenzo or Wagner goes crazy at AAA, that you're thinking there can't miss as the Alex Bregman pennies on the dollar successor, you're paying Bregman through his age 37 season. Well, that's better than 40 or 41. So 7 years, $210 million would strike me as a little bit high, but not wildly so given the current MLB marketplace.
Yeah, I know the circumstances are different. I have a hard time believing Jim Crane's going to pay Bregman more than Altuve or Yordan Alvarez. Or I just, and I get it. It's a different situation. Bregman's he's going to be a true free agent here. It's, you're not buying off any years in this case. It's just, that's so much more money than we've ever seen Jim Crane spend. I'd love to see Breggy stick around. It doesn't feel like a Jim Crane kind of thing. So, and the fact that they haven't offered a contract, this kind of feels like the Correa thing playing out again a little bit to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess when I'm looking at it, I wonder who the next Astro to be extended by Jim Crane and Dana Brown is, because I don't really see, again, like Brian Abreu for my my outlook, looking at who it makes sense. Again, we're talking about the three guys that are in that prime area in arbitration or pre-arb that, you look at. I feel like he's the most likely out of those. And then unless Jim Crane really becomes, unless he and Tucker are able to come to some sort of creative agreement with that contract, I do feel like Tucker is the more likely of the two to get extended out of Bregman and Tucker, but I still don't see there being a high likelihood, just because Tucker, again, Charlie, you talked about the numbers. Like, Tucker's numbers are that of a superstar. He's one of the best right fielders in the game, and so I think he will command a much higher ticket on the open market. Do you guys remember a week or so ago? It might be 2 weeks now, where Kyle Tucker was talking. They asked him about where they were at in the process, and he said that he was more of a fan of getting this over with. He didn't want this to last forever. Do you guys get a sense that means that he's still open to getting a deal done and them reaching an agreement to where this doesn't, he doesn't have to hear these questions for another couple of seasons? Or does that mean that he's ready to just get it over with one way or the other?
Well, we'd all want to get it over with ASCP also if it meant locking in $250 million or something in that range. And Tuck is 2 years away. I also want to mention, a baseline on this, and there'll be understandable fretting. This has been such a glorious run for the Astros with presumably more to it. 2024 need not be the last run for the Astros, maybe for an individual player or two as they've lost other guys. But the Astros are third in Major League Baseball payroll going into 2024. We might say the Dodgers gamed the system with the Ohtani contract, but payroll for 2024, it's the Mets and Yankees and then the Astros. So it's not that the Astros are cheaping out and Jim Crane's going miserly. His discipline has served them very well in budgeting short-term, mid-term, long-term. Now, at some point, like brain drain in the scientific community, there's a threshold of talent drain that can help sink the ship. And if you lose Bregman and Tucker in successive seasons on top of all their other losses, and Verlander ages out and Fromber's up when Tucker is up, and if your farm system's not really rejuvenating, right, that day of reckoning or phase of reckoning could be coming for the Astros, but it's not a sure thing that it gets here within the next year or two. So I think Crane's level of credibility is pretty high on this. Tucker's 3 years younger than Alex Bregman, certainly was a better player than Alex Bregman last year, also in 2021. But, he's not Ronald Acuna Jr., who's in an 8-year, $100 million steal of a deal for the Atlanta Braves, as long as that knee turns out to be all right, that he's getting checked out this week. But we mentioned the younger guys and Crane being loath to do the long-term deals, right? Abreu's 3 seasons away from free agency. Jeremy Pena, who to me is a prove-it guy, but he's 4 years away from free agency. And Yainer Diaz, the stud babe in the woods, he's 5 seasons away from free agency. So if you do longer-term deals, obviously there are many, many fewer dollars involved. Well, Dana Brown comes from that Atlanta Braves where they locked up Acuna, they locked up Riley, they locked up Ozzie Albies, they've locked up Spencer Strider post-Brown, but they've done it over and over again. So I think Crane and Brown are in sync on how to approach the younger guys. But it's with Bregman and Tucker. Will the Astros be willing to go where they've never gone before in retaining their free agents? So they did offer 5 years, $160 to Correa.
Yeah, they did. And let me throw Fromber in here for a second. I mean, we just got some news today with Zach Wheeler agreed to a 3-year, $126 million extension. He's going to get $42 million a year for his age 35, 36, and 37 season. So, man, if you're Fromber looking at this and he bounces back and has another Cy Young quality type season, he's not far away from having to look at him and be like, what are we going to do here? Because you can't expect Verlander's going to be here forever. What's the plan going to be? And so much is riding on Christian Javier. Does he return to form or not? That'll really depend on how much you feel like you got to keep Fromber around. So, man, if you're Fromber's agent, you like that news right there. Him getting paid all the way up to age 38, $42 million a year. That's wild.
Fromber's free agent season will precede him turning 32, right? At the age 32 season when he's 2026. I just don't see the Astros going the 7 years, 175 type deal the Phillies did with Nola. $42 million per year. Well, Verlander makes 43. Of course, the Mets are defraying a massive chunk of that. So with a 2-year run up to free agency for Fromber, that's where, how does Spencer Arrighetti evolve? Last year's second-round draft pick, Alonzo Treadwell. Is he a future starting pitcher, 6'8" guy with wow stuff? Or is he going to be a future giant reliever? What happens with Javier, who has 4 seasons left on his contract? Is he their next number one post Verlander, where you're thinking, well, we have our ace in Javier. We don't want to pay $35 million per year to keep Fromber. I do circle back to one. It's always much easier to spend gobs of somebody else's money. But man, the sport is so flush with cash with all these deals we see across the sport. And the Pittsburgh Pirates, a 1-year deal, but they gave Aroldis Chapman $10 million to be able to trade him for a prospect in July. The Astros, a money-making machine in 2023, and I don't think they're going to be struggling in 2024. But again, they're third in payroll. So any accusation of a crane starting to rub nickels together and that's going to take the Astros down, we need to see that occur first.
Yeah, and you mentioned Ohtani, and I think it's also worth noting too that Teoscar Hernandez also agreed to defer $8.5 million of his deal as well. And yes, the Astros are spending money, but maybe as a fan, maybe you're not loving where some of that money is going, whether it's Montero or Abreu or Lance McCullers, and not to mention Uncle Mike's contract from last season. So yes, they are spending. Maybe you'd love that if some of that money got spread around to some guys that were actually on the field or produced more. So, I mean, again, like you can't ever tell. I don't think anyone saw Jose Abreu's season coming last season, nor did we see the gross regression of Rafael Montero, and he could bounce back.
And I just want to drop the note, the athletic predictive model evaluating looming free agents, a guy named Tim Britton put the piece together. You hit on some, you miss on others, just like picking games. Their valuation of what Josh Hader would get on the market was 5 years, $94 million. So Price is right. They'd have won both showcases with that. They didn't go over and came damn close. So if he's anywhere close on Bregman at 7 years, 210, there's your price of poker.
But I think that production that you mentioned coming from the young guys is going to be certainly key, because we've continually heard about how the farm system is thin and how they don't have, some of these, there's not a lot of like top tier prospects that are pushing to make their way up onto the big team. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. That's why we talked about, is this the last year of that window? Because you start having to answer some major questions after this season going forward. So we will have to see. But in the meantime, we'll stick to this year and this season. And so that's going to be it for this episode of Stone Cold Stros. And if you enjoyed the show, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcast. Charlie, Josh, and I will be back here next week. But you don't have to wait that long, because if you just subscribe to the SportsMap Houston channel on YouTube, Josh and I will be back midweek to give you some little bonus content. And also, we'll give you some bonus podcast episodes too. So that's going to be it. Until next time, go Stros.